President Yeol hosts Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Chinese Premier Qiang here in Seoul for the first trilateral talks in over 4 years. And on this edition of Issues and Insiders, we touch upon the issues on their table. Hope your work week is off to a good start. It's Monday here in Korea and you're watching Issues and Insiders. I'm Min Sunhee. The trilateral interaction among South Korea, Japan and China took place here on this Monday. And for more on the events thus far, I have Nicolas Rocca live on the line. Nicolas, it's good to have you on.
Good to be here, Sunny.
I also have Malene Jensen with us. Malene, welcome back.
Thank you.
Right, Nicolas, let's take this in chronological order. Let's begin with your takeaway from the bilateral meeting between President Yoon Suk-yeol and Chinese Premier Qiang that took place this past Sunday. What do you believe was worth noting during this particular interaction?
I think the fact that talks are starting again between the two countries is itself a positive sign. Relations have been quite tense since President Yoon Suk-yeol came into power, mostly because of the close relationship between Seoul and the United States, and of course the trilateral cooperation with Japan, United States and Korea since the Camp David declaration last summer. There's been tensions on the semiconductor industry with China. Of course, we know that the United States would rather its partners would limit the cooperation with China on the semiconductors. Seoul has been very cautious on this matter, trying to protect the interest of SK Hynix and, of course, Samsung. Prime Minister of China, Qiang, met with Lee Jae-yong, the chairman of Samsung, which is a quite important sign on Sunday. The key points I would like to focus on the meeting between the President Yoon Suk-yeol and Lee Qiang would be, first of all, the fact that there would be a diplomatic and security dialogue during the two countries that will start again mid-June, so pretty soon. The fact that free trade talks will also start again, and China trying, to attract South Korean investments in its country, trying to, ensure that economic cooperation goes forward. That's quite important, I think. Then there's also geopolitical issues that were mentioned. Israel, Ukraine, no key announcements on more local defense issues from this encounter. North Korea was mentioned by the South Korean side after the meeting, and Taiwan was mentioned by the Chinese side, which I think is quite important. If you remember, in an interview in 2023, President Yoon had mentioned that Taiwan issue was a global issue and not solely a China issue, which of course infuriated Beijing. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China mentioned that Yoon Suk-yeol affirmed or reaffirmed the support to the One China policy. So that's, a little step forward for the bilateral relationship. And so that would be the big lines of what I'd focus on for this specific encounter.
Right. And Malene, President Yoon also sat down with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on Sunday after his talks with Chinese Premier Qiang. What do you care to highlight from that particular interaction?
Well, I think everyone was really eager to know what was going on between the row over line, where some line consists of both Korean and Japanese joint venture, and there has been some talks that the Japanese side was trying to push the Korean side to sell their stocks in line. So obviously everyone was looking to see if this was something that the two leaders would touch upon, which they did. They said that the line row should not be any problem for the diplomatic relationship between Japan and Korea, and specifically Yoon's people were out and saying that that they definitely didn't want to see this as any kind of diplomatic hindrance towards the ties that has only been growing stronger between Japan and South Korea since Yoon took office. I think this was quite what we could expect Yoon to say, because it's so obvious that he's trying really, really hard to get a warmer relationship with Japan. And again, what we see here is Yoon being the eager one to warm up the relations, being the one who pushes to become closer with Japan, while Kishida, of course, he touched upon it, but he didn't really say much. And it was also the Japanese part of line that has been pushing the Korean stockholders. It has not been the other way around. And Kishida, again, didn't really comment much on it, which is another case of showing that Yoon may be the weak side in this diplomatic relationship. Like, he's the one giving in. He's the one who's really, really trying hard to get it closer to Japan. Might also be one reason for this might be that Japan has the biggest economy of those two and is in many ways the strongest ally. And a very important ally for South Korea right now, specifically if they also want to get closer to the United States. Anyway, apart from the line cooperation or the line talks, the two leaders also discussed that they would cooperate closer in terms of energy and technology and supply chains. So, all in all, it was a meeting that is definitely pushing the agenda closer relationship between the two countries.
Right. Now, these bilateral exchanges, Nicholas, were followed by a trilateral meeting on this Monday among South Korea, Japan and China. That being said, Nicholas, what do you suppose are China's intentions of perhaps partaking in the trilateral talks?
Well, I mean, it's your neighbors. You have to talk with your neighbors. You cannot choose them anyway. So I think China has to obviously discuss with South Korea and discuss with Japan. I think that the fact that they've seen their two neighbors going, growing closer and closer relationship, not only with the United States but also together, is, in a way quite threatening to its power in the region and its influence in the regions. Obviously, there's also an economic side, an economic aspect in this willingness to discuss. There's a need of cooperation with, the South Korean companies, with the Japanese company. It's important partners for China, and I think, there was a willingness to discuss. We've seen this, since the pandemic ended. China kind of shifted and now wants to start again, the discussion. And also, I think there's a, geopolitical aspects of seeing China as trying to show himself as a power of balance, sort of bridge between Russia, maybe North Korea also in a way, and the Western world and its allies. And this can be what it also is trying to do. I just read the joint declaration that came out of the statements, and there's a few lines, even though it's very little, on North Korea and on the fact that the three countries have to work together for political solution. I think it's important also for China to continue to push this narrative that if anything can happen with North Korea, any political engagement, if there's still a little hope of that, it will have to be with China. It will also have to be with Russia. It will also have to be with the United States. But we know that, China can be this middle ground in a way between all those persons. So that could be the interests. But I think the main one definitely is that anyways, you need to talk with your neighbors, specifically if you have this close economic relationship with them. And we've seen South Korea, for instance, having his commercial balance with the United States growing, the economic partnership with the US growing, and it's, the investments of Chinese company in South Korea as well as in Japan decreasing in those last few years, which is, of course, a subject of worry for China. So, there's always multiple reasons to engage in those kinds of talks. And I think, those are the few reasons that come to mind.
Right. And staying with intentions, Malene, what would you say are perhaps South Korea's and neighboring Japan's intentions of seeking dialogue with China?
Well, it's actually very close to what Nicolas is saying. Like, you can't choose your neighbors, and you have to have some sort of meeting, some sort of relationship, some sort of talks with your neighbors, even though you don't agree with them, even though you don't share the same core values. I do believe that it is vital for South Korea and Japan to talk with China. China is such a huge international player and such a huge part of Asia that it is evident that they just have to find a way to cooperate, even though they do not share many of the same, as I said, values, policies, ways of acting in the international community. It is, of course, super, super important for them. China is a big trade partner. China has a big economy. There are so many opportunities of trading, cooperating with China, that it is just not something that particularly South Korea and Japan can ignore.
Right, indeed. Nicholas, prior to this regional summit, South Korea neighboring Japan shared a series of sanctions on individuals and institutions with regard to alleged arms collaboration between North Korea and Russia, which are, of course, in violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Could you tell us a bit about these sanctions?
Yes, there were 7 North Korean individuals and 2 Russian vessels that were targeted by the South Korean sanctions. Japan targeted 11 organizations and 1 Russian group that was involved in the military cooperation to help Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That is, of course, with North Korean weapons. So basically, that's what was targeted, the transfer of weapons from North Korea to Russia that has been documented by satellite pictures mentioned by multiple sources in the United States, in South Korea. And those sanctions targeted, interestingly, 1 North Korean that represented a Syrian state-owned company that helped make links between the Wagner Group, that was, of course, involved and still is in Ukraine, and North Korea from 2022 to 2023. The other individuals were, of course, those IT workers that work abroad and help North Korea bring foreign currency back to the country. What is interesting, according to me, on those sanctions is that, in a way, it's the only mean that is, that South Korea and Japan and the United States can use to try to, show their disagreement with North Korea and to try to impact North Korea in a way, because even though it's in breach of the United Nations Security Council resolution, we know that there won't be further sanctions, and we know that those sanctions are not really applied. What interrogates me is the practical influence of those unilateral sanctions. How effective are they? That's a hard question, of course, to answer, because we know that a lot of countries, a few countries, help North Korea evade sanctions. So I think those unilateral sanctions that we've seen in the United States, South Korea, and Japan, they are meant to show that, first of all, the 3 countries work together to try to stop North Korea from pursuing its actions, and it's a symbolic meaning, a message to the world, more than actually, a practical, efficient way to limit North Koreans' influence and trade.
Right, and staying with North Korea, Malene, the new satellite images are reportedly raising fresh fears about the possibility of a 7th nuclear test by Pyongyang. Could you tell us a bit about this coverage, and what looks to be the possibility of a 7th nuclear test by Pyongyang, do you think?
Yes, so it seems that the satellite images are showing that there is some activity at the Yongbyon nuclear complex. So it seems like North Korea is producing uranium that they might use for some kind of nuclear tests. So we have several different types of satellite images. Some of them are infrared images, which shows the temperature. So you can see that the temperature at this nuclear complex is rising. I believe it was rising from 13 degrees to 28 degrees, according to these satellite images, which is not evidence directly, but it is definitely highly indicative that this nuclear complex is now being used by North Korea at the moment. And that is, of course, a clear violation of the US sanctions against North Korea. And it is definitely also concerning here in South Korea and in Japan, as well as, of course, the rest of the Western world. So Kim Jong-un has already stressed the need to make more, strengthen their military, to strengthen their arsenal. So it is highly likely that North Korea will be conducting some sort of nuclear tests in the near future, which is, of course, a very, very big worry to particularly South Korea and Japan.
All right, and speaking about this concern, Nicholas, I understand this might be a tough question, but what do you envision following a potential 7th nuclear test by North Korea? I mean, what options does the international community have that will effectively perhaps rein in the regime's reckless weapons ambitions?
Well, there's not much options if it's not if we cannot count with China or and Russia's cooperation. But it might depend also how China will react to this test. It's not necessary that on the Chinese side you might be very happy of North Korea doing a nuclear test. It's its neighbor. It's not sure that Beijing really wishes those kinds of actions. And we need to bear in mind, I think, that for North Korea on its scales of message to the world and military provocation, the nuclear test, it's kind of its last card. There's not much it can do after that, to try to create a reaction from the world. So I think they will also tread lightly and be very cautious on the timing, on the reason why they would do a nuclear test. What experts seem to have been saying is that they would, try to miniaturize the bombs, try to get smaller bombs that would allow them to have tactical nuclear weapons. That could be the aim of the test. But is it necessary to do it quick? Is it necessary for North Korea and for Pyongyang to maybe create a bit of worry in Beijing and make the relationship with its main partner, maybe a bit weaker. But then what can, the international community do to answer that? It is unclear because there's really been no way to actually stop North Korean nuclear ambition and its overall weapons ambition. We just received this morning the news that North Korea will soon release its second spy satellites. It has been able to achieve a lot without any cooperation. And now that we've seen, Russia helping North Korea on those matters, the list of the North Korean, weapon arsenal has been growing. Its ambitions have been growing also. So it's hard to tell what can be done. Sanctions don't seem to have been very effective, but also releasing the sanction probably won't have any positive effects. So I think it's an incredibly hard question you're asking, Esani, because it's really no clear answer appears. What is sure for me is that it's really the last card in the North Koreans' hand. So they will be very cautious before playing it, and it might focus before on more effective weapon development. We just said intelligence development with the spy satellite, but also probably the kind of weapons they might be able to sell to Russia to fuel its war in Ukraine, or other kinds of weapons that could be more practical for, in case of a conflict around the Korean Peninsula. But I think it's been very hard trying to predict the geopolitical unfolding of this region, but of the world globally those last years. So I think I'm going to stay cautious.
Right, Nicolas, I have to agree. It really is a tough question. And I'm going to give another tough question to Malene. Do you see China and Russia perhaps joining South Korea and its allies in condemning North Korea in the case of a seventh nuclear test?
That is a tough question. I don't necessarily think that Russia and China will react the same way, though. As we know, North Korea is China's sole military ally through an official treaty, meaning that it might be difficult for China to directly condemn North Korea, or they might at least, because of this treaty, think twice before condemning the nuclear attacks. With that being said, I do really not think that any kind of nuclear tests is in China's benefits. China cannot benefit from this in any way, because more North Korean nuclear tests means a bigger US military presence in South Korea and in the surrounding area, which is not something China is interested in. China is, on the other hand, interested in less US presence in Asia in general, so China can do whatever they want to do without having that big of an international eye in their specific area. So more US military means more instability in the region, and China is very, very interested in more stability, not more instability. So for that reason, I do find it maybe a bit unrealistic that China would condemn nuclear attacks. With that being said, though, I do think that if they did, it would greatly matter to North Korea. I think China has a big say. Chinese officials are saying that they themselves don't have a big say in this, but I doubt that is true. Russia, on the other hand, might actually be interested in these kind of nuclear tests specifically because it provides more U.S. Military presence and a U.S. keen eye on that region, which puts U.S. eye more away from Europe, where Russia is currently having war with Ukraine. So if the U.S. is distracted by North Korea, it might be easier for Russia to continue the war in Ukraine, to get the world's eye a little bit away from what Russia is doing right now in Europe, which is of course very concerning from a European perspective.
Right, and that being said, then Nicolas, maybe a very brief response from you on this issue with regard to Russia's engagement of tactical nuclear weapons exercises recently. How worried should Europe be?
Well, I mean, Russia's been waving this nuclear flag for a while, a lot at the beginning of the war in Ukraine, a bit less. And now, again, it might be also an answer to what French President Emmanuel Macron said, that, you know, he doesn't close the door to sending troops to Ukraine. David Cameron, also the foreign minister of the United Kingdom, mentioned that there could be use of some England-provided weapon on the Russian soil. I think Europe should be worried, especially because the odds are not looking very much in their favor. Russia is gaining ground, and European defense production is not able to sustain the rhythm and to fuel the Ukraine war efforts satisfyingly. So I think it is some cause for worry, but it does not mean neither that Russia is actually ready to go this far. So I think it's something we need to be very cautious and watch it unfold in the next few weeks, months.
Right, indeed. All right, Nicolas, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts today. And Malene here, thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.